Diversity talk from James and Luisa. James is at AHMM, been an architect for a while. I think he knows a few people now. And Luisa, you have initiated and you created 10AN, and they're going to share their story and inform us a little bit about what's going on in the world and how we can progress and be a bit more sensitive and help in progress. Over to you.
Thank you. So today we are presenting a bit of a mixture of what neurodiversity is, definitions and terms, my own personal experience with a focus in practice, and also James is going to tell us about his story and his perspectives as well. So at NAN, we advocate, educate, and collaborate for neurodiversity in architecture and design. I founded NAN because I had a really tough university experience while studying as a Part 2. And it was really important to me to connect with other neurodivergent architects and other neurodivergent architecture students. And even the network has been growing, and we've managed to also incorporate other pieces of the built environment, like access auditors and people who are interested in neurodiversity in general as well. And so these are a few of our projects and talks. Actually, the first time I organized a workshop was at the AA in 2023 for the new standards, where we had different groups, and I was running a mini workshop for neurodiversity, and I connected with people there, and that's where the idea for the network came from. But since then, we've done University Week celebrations, done a couple of collaborations and talks, and also workshops for children and families, which engage more with the community. So it's not just about the practice and experience of neurodivergent architects and designers, but also about engaging with the community in meaningful ways. So our workshops are open for everybody. And these are a few pictures of past events. And we do these giant knitting and crochet pieces in our workshops, which I find that are really important because they embed sensory experience at the level of the engagement that you're having with the community. It's not just thinking, let's make an activity, it's thinking about how can we make that activity as neuro-inclusive as possible through sensory aspects. And my background, although I am trained a Part 2, I taught at the secondary school for 2 years, and then I was a product designer for a startup, and I embed those things into what we do at NAN. So the crochet hooks and everything is all designed to think about neurodiversity. So I wanted to start with a few terms. Neurodiversity is the term used to describe the variation in neurocognitive profiles across the whole population. This is a definition by the PAS. Some people claim it's a diversity of brains, but as we know, the nervous system is not just the brain, it's also the body. And so for me, if we focus then on neurodivergence, I like to define it as a divergence from a neuronormative experience of body-mind. And this can be thinking, feeling, and behaving differently from a societal norm. The term neurodivergent can refer to someone who experiences neurodivergence. It is not a diagnosis. It is an empowering and non-pathologizing term. Neurotypical refers to an absence of the divergent experience. So someone who doesn't experience neurodivergence would be considered neurotypical. And neurodiverse refers to a group that has both neurodivergent and neurotypical experiences. So this I always find important to talk about is the medical model of disability, where it places, defines the disability to be with the person, and it's defined by their impairment or differences. Opposing that, you have the social model of disability, which refers to where disability is something that is a verb, so you're disabled by something. So it's society's challenges that are disabling you. It's not something wrong with you. It's something wrong with society and the way we cater or make things bespoke for people with differences. When barriers are removed, disabled people can be independent and equal in society with choice and control over their own lives. So that's the crucial differences. And a lot of people still have their mindsets stuck on the medical model because it's what has been developed first, but now we are obviously gaining more knowledge from sociologists and psychologists, and we understand the social model. There's a lot more models of disability. There's the relational model as well. But what I want to touch on today is also hypersensitivity, which it means that you're very sensitive to stimulus from the environment, and it can lead to avoidance from that stimulus. So things like quiet spaces are really important, green spaces are really important for hypersensitivity. Opposing that, you have hyposensitivity, which can lead to attraction from stimuli from the environment. So you would want to hear louder noises or have some stimulation. These vary in people across time and senses. So in the morning, you might feel like it's really hard to get in the shower, the water, the textures. But in the afternoon, you might feel like you want some stimulation, you want to fidget, you want to engage in other ways with your senses. And so these are the senses. We have the famous 5: touch, smell, taste, sound, sight. And then you have interoception, proprioception, and vestibular, which not many people know about those other senses. But interoception is a big one. For me, for example, I spent the whole day working, forgetting about eating. So I was so glad to see food on the tables when I got here. And so interoception is understanding our internal states. Could be feelings, could be temperature, pain, hunger, and thirst. So I always forget to eat and drink. That's one of the things. So I have some hyposensitivity in the interoceptive sense. And this is a diagram from a paper by the NDTI, and which it actually delimitates how to support autistics flourish at home. So it's a good paper for those working in housing and wanting to make the space more accommodating to autism. So which sensory profile should we design for? Well, the answer for architects is for hypersensitivity, because we design for bigger scale environments. Hyposensitivity or hypersensitive people in a certain sense, they can always find stimulation through fidgeters like the one I carry today, or through body movement. I always like to bounce about, and through moving furniture or other types of stimuli. So kinetic furniture is really important, for example, for hypersensitivity. For hypersensitivity, it's hard to find an environment absent of stimulus. This is why green spaces, parks, and quiet areas are important. They embrace hypersensitivity. You can always also design for hyposensitivity, and these are a few resources that I recommend if you want to really dig deep into the topic. So the PAS has these fantastic tables at the end in Annex B, and they basically define suggestions on all the senses for hypersensitivity, and then they have suggestions also for hyposensitivity. And it comes to things like the color in the room, or the quality of the lighting, or it could be textures, it could be a lot of design aspects involved in those tables. And then so that would be outwards when you're producing a project for a client. But inwards in your practices and in your processes, as an architecture practice, you can also look at the Architects Neurodiversity Toolkit by the Architects Mental Wellbeing Forum. It was released last year. It's a really useful resource. And the foreword is by Jean Hewitt, who is also the technical writer of the PAS. And it's a fantastic toolkit for people to use in practice. But I want to leave you with a few thoughts. In my opinion, not everything that works will be labeled with neurodiversity. Sometimes things work because we care. A space that is truly accessible is occupied by people with compassion and understanding of each other's needs. And adjustments to the built environment are great, they're really helpful, but they will not replace positive social interactions. So having a positive outcome and a positive social interaction with someone on a rough day or on any day helps you boost your dopamine, helps you feel included in society. So to me, adjustments are great. What we do as designers is great. But I feel like we need to move past that and nurture a kinder attitude towards people with differences, or towards everybody as well. I'm going to pass on to James.
Thank you, Luisa. And and I really want to thank everybody for creating a space to talk about neurodivergence and neurodiversity at the end of a busy day as well. I do appreciate it. Yeah. I'm really grateful to be here. I'm going to start. A few years ago, I decided to swim to the lighthouse that was the inspired Virginia Woolf's to the lighthouse. And I'd asked the lifeguard to, on the beach, is this okay? It was a calm day, and he was like, yeah, okay. So it seemed doable. And I like the idea of this personal challenge because I'm in a tough time, and it was to kind of calm my head and do something challenging. However, what should have been doable on a calm day, but the sea had some other different ideas, and there was a high tide, there were big waves, there was a strong current, and I got sucked out in towards the Atlantic. So the RNLI sent out somebody called them, and they sent out a helicopter. They then found me in the seas and sent out a jet ski, and I got rescued. It is a perfect insight into an ADHD brain. It links wildly different things, from a very highbrow, quite hard to read book to the lighthouse, and open water swimming. It also is that insight about ADHD loving chasing endorphins in danger as well. And the third point is it spectacularly misses the obvious point, which is that while it'd be completely fine on a non-windy day when the tide is in and not moving, when the waves are crashing around and the tide is rushing in, you get swept out the edges of the bay. So it went wrong horribly, and I sat on the beach the next day, and I felt completely smashed by the process and embarrassed by my family, the family we were with. And my wife walked up to me and she gave me this rock. And I brought it home, and she said, take it home, let it remind you to be a rock and not tossed by the waves. And she sees this thing daily. We've been together 30 years. She sees it in me, she sees it in the kids she teaches, she sees it in our daughter as well. Life brings waves for all of us, but with neurodivergence, they're often tsunami-sized waves. We get thrown around, at times. And today I want to talk about navigating architecture, navigating neurodivergence, and the merge of those. And what helps me to more often be more rock-like and less lost swimmer. And I think the swim to the lighthouse is for me a metaphor into who we really are, to understand that, what we're made of, and that really interesting exploration as we get older to understand ourselves better, what our authentic selves look like. My journey with neurodivergence started with this book here. My daughter was diagnosed with dyspraxia, and being a loving dad, I did what any self-respecting architect would do, and I went on Amazon and I bought the book. And then that was 2015. And then 6 years later, I picked up the book and started to read it and found something rather unsettling, which is that page after page I recognised myself in the book. So that was a first step. I'm very often asked, why bother? You're 57, James, you've got along okay, why bother finding out about neurodivergence, your neurodivergence, why explore? And I think it's a fair question, why bother? I didn't know about it until 6 years ago. And the answer is more complex than it might seem. And then the first step really for me, was doom scrolling on Instagram through and seen all those adverts for testing yourself on university. As soon as you've seen one and pause for a second, then you get many, many. So I did that, and actually they're kind of surprisingly revealing in a slightly addictive way. And then I was out for a run with Andrew, who's a friend of mine, but he's also the head of HR at HMO. And I said out loud to him, because running helps me to be a bit more open, I think I might be neurodivergent. And that was quite trusting of me, but it was a positive conversation. He's a lovely person. It was a human-to-human interaction, and me trusted, and that wasn't, it was a suitable response. 2 years later, I emailed my GP. I don't like going to see him. So I emailed him, and I got a phone call, and I filled out a form, and you have to love questionnaires if you go down this route, by the way. And we had a phone call, and he started me on the process. And then the reason why, so this is the first thing. And then you get this other. He put me onto this, and a month later, the ADHD self-report and this World Health Organization test. And then another very, very long survey came to me, and also my wife had to fill in a very long survey as well. You have to love surveys. And then 11 months later, on 19th of February 2025, I finally had an hour-long face-to-face with a psychiatrist, an NHS psychiatrist. And that was very interesting. Actually, it was a very enjoyable process. I was really surprised. I didn't get to lie on a bench, but it was really interesting. And I scored 73% in all those questionnaires. The pass mark for ADHD is 42. So this is one of the kind of highest grades I ever got. And also, ADHD stands for Attention Deficit and Hyperactivity Disorder. So there's two sides to that. And I scored high on both the attention deficit and the hyperactivity, which are, and that kind of tends sometimes it feels like a superpower, and sometimes it feels like your brain's been sucked out to me. So that was a diagnosis. I did start telling a small number of trusted friends, that I'd had this diagnosis. And people have been friends many, many years. And 3 of them independently said almost exactly the same thing. You don't believe that nonsense, do you? Which, I've got to say, didn't go down well, and did have an impact on our friendship. And I'm aware that I tick a lot of boxes. I'm white, professional, reasonably affluent. I'm English speaking, I have a British passport. But even with all of that privilege that goes with those things, there isn't much understanding or acceptance from some people when you say, hey, I'm neurodivergent. And I do feel like if that's how it feels for me, it's not hard to imagine how much worse, how much harder it is for people with less privilege, less security, why so many people keep it quiet, fewer advocates. There's still a massive amount of work still to be done in this area. One of the most useful things in this was actually my self-assessment. So it's very, very long. I'm not expecting you to read all of it, although you can please if you want to take a photograph. But it helped me. So there are strengths, and I think so highs and lows. ADHD gives me, I think, great creativity, huge energy and enthusiasm at times, capacity for endurance, and ultra running, and for Ironman, and all this kind of nut stuff. The ability to hyper-focus ridiculously at times on things, a lot of time. But there's the other side. I'm very sensitive to criticism. Large, noisy groups can be a Christmas party at HMO, 400 people or 500 people. It's absolutely horrific. I can do it about half an hour, Lists, I'm such a, OneNote is, and we were talking, AI is a real help to me as well, to kind of translate me into neurotypical. And, sometimes I was on time, but And there are many times I've been very, very late, or I've missed quite a lot of planes in my life as well. It has pushed me, diagnosis, everything, to how do I live sustainably? How do I build a life that is a bit more rock-like and not just permanently on the edge of burnout? And stillness has become a thing for me. So Amanda and I spent a week in Carthage last year, which was very nice. And I put away the phone and all social media, and I just said, I'm not communicating with anybody. And I just walked by the beach and I read, and it was really helpful just to kind of take a step back. And also last year, my daughter Millie and I walked the Camino from Porto to Santiago. 10 days we walked, it's an amazing thing to do. We walked by the ocean for 5 days, and then by the river, and 4 days through the hills of Spain. And it's just the clamour of the city just fell behind, and you just get the stillness of the kind of the ancient pilgrimage way. And there's the thing with the Camino that they say is you go in with one intention, one reason for doing it, and you come away with something different. And so what I came away with was, don't get involved in nonsense conversations. And that's a deep thing. So I try not to. There are a lot of things in life that I really try not to, hey, you can have that. I'm not going to get involved in that. I need that stillness in my life. So there's a natural side. Oh, and there's also this lion's mane mushroom coffee, which a lot of neurodivergents try, and it's great, it's interesting, it's a calming thing, it's quite expensive. But it's you try different things, and that's something that's quite nice. There's also, and I'm not, Gino corrects me, not to use drugs as a term, but there's pharmaceutical solutions as well that you get prescribed, diagnosed, or what's the correct term? Sorry.
Medicine.
Medicine. Okay, medicine. There you go. So this is the classic one, which is a Medicanet, which actually isn't speed, it isn't amphetamine. It's a kind of similar thing to that. It blocks the uptake of the neurotransmitters and dopamine, and it kind of calms you through the day and makes you kind of continue for. So you can end up taking the tablets as well.
With a prescription.
Totally. And it takes you an awful long time to get to this stage where you can get this. It's also about the industry we work in, and I want to sort of touch briefly on that. Approximately 14% of the population is neurodivergent, but it's estimated that over 20% of the creative industry are. And so that's higher. And yet in the construction industry, it's estimated that 25% of construction workers believe themselves to be. And there's a reason for that, which is that a lot of people who don't get on at school end up in construction. They're very able. And we did a survey a few years ago, and we're 11.76% of 34 out of 289 who finished it. And we're doing another survey in 2 weeks' time, and I suspect that more people will be aware 6 years later. So they tell you something, that neurodivergence isn't rare in construction and architecture. Sorry to say, but there's a difficult part that comes with that. So there's Pires reports that people with neurodivergent conditions report discrimination, bullying, marginalisation, isolation, hopelessness, and despair. And that can significantly affect mental health as well. And there is this darker side to the story, which I touch on. And the Pittsburgh study said that autistic adults are 25 times more likely to make a suicide attempt than non-autistic. And I've spoken, I'm doing a construction, I'm doing a 25-story tower over in West London, and I was really pleased to be able to go there during Mental Health Awareness Week last year and to speak to the group of people there about some of my experiences. And the best bit of that was afterwards, when I was sitting in the canteen and having something just to kind of calm down afterwards, and the electrician guy who was at the tea league said, "That was great." He got his team together for a toolbox talk afterwards. A bunch of them hadn't been there, and they had a really good chat about, where they were and their mental health and all those things. And for me, honestly, that was the most rewarding thing I've ever done in 40 years I've been in architecture. That was great. There's some horrible statistics about the construction industry. And that's not all about neurodivergence, of course. I think what we do as organisations is hugely powerful and important. And we've been working on something which I'm really proud of, actually, which is for the last couple of years, we've been working on having our own neurodiversity policy, and we've now published that. I'm very happy to give you a copy of it. And I think we were probably the first, but that's okay. We're really happy to do that. So we have a policy in place for neurodiversity, but also to kind of look for the needs of neurodivergence within the HMA and support them. And one of the things of that is reasonable adjustments. So this is the standing page, which is linked to that policy. So there's a reasonable adjustments to be made for neurodivergence. And this is what I pick. So I frequently will take, we have a quiet room at HMA, which is what we were talking about. And often I will book the quiet room most days, and will, having smashed out, reviewed 50 drawings from the trade contractors, I will go and sit there and just decompress, or after a particularly brutal meeting with the client and the trade contractors and the engineers, and I'll just take more time to calm out there. And noise cancelling headphones are great as well. So small changes, which are quite, and I have the quietest, most isolated desk in the office, and I stick there. Nobody else would want it anyway. It's next to all the PPE equipment and the toilets, and the window. But it's just calm, and a calmer place for me to operate. I love this quote: "The place in which I'll fit will not exist until I make it." It's actually from a poet, and I feel like at HMM and with the work doing, a lot of it's been fighting for this, and I think it's worthwhile, really worthwhile to fight for these things. Not just our work, but the side things we do. And in 2 weeks we're doing our neurodiversity celebration work at HMM, and I'm really pleased that I'm not going to do anything with that. We have a Sefer, a young neurodivergent architect, and they're going to share their neurodivergent journey. With Chris, who's a neurodivergent data analyst, and he's going to share the new poll, and Kristen is going to announce the first 5 neurodiversity champions that we're starting, and it's training for 5 of us on that. We're not there, we're about 400 people, and yet, so we should have about 80 people who are neurodivergent, and yet we only have, only 3 of us have come out as neurodivergent in the practice, and there are only 6 of us in the HMM neurodivergent group. So there's still an enormous amount of work to be done. In our projects, there are projects that went before. The R&IB building is the first building built to the PAS, which is a neurodivergent kind of standard, which Luisa talked about. I really recommend going there. It's a lovely building in many, many ways. You've got great space here. You recognise some things which are similar, but it's really interesting to see that anybody would be happy working there, but there are spaces for calmer spaces in particular there. It's a great building. And I got to be I was the project architect for 2 Russell Square, which is the Home Office headquarters, and the government, whilst we were working on it, came out with the GPA standards, which include design for neurodiversity as well, which is really interesting. And that talks about varied sensory spaces, adjustable lighting, acoustic controls, those are big things, flexible seating. And And it was nice. We entered into the Building of the Year, and there was a neurodivergence category in that to be graded for. And hey, we won the Building of the Year last year, so that was kind of really nice. Richard Rogers, who was dyslexic, said dyslexia allows you to look at a broader element and forget what is normally done. And I think we're part of a community firms who work in that. And neurodivergent minds often are able to see a pattern or a possibility that's a bit different from the norm. And that's kind of my sell for supporting neurodivergence within an architect's office is that they'll often be able to come in and kind of from left field on an idea that comes a little bit different from the norm. I do find that clients are very supportive of this as well, especially when it's low cost, which
I've seen things people wouldn't believe. Attack ships on fire off the shore of Orion. I watched sea beams glitter in the darkness 10 hours a day. All those moments will be lost in time, like tears in rain.
Sometimes I do feel like a strange land. Learning how to navigate a system, a world which isn't designed for people like me to be in. And like the replicant in Blade Runner, I think neurodivergence has great strengths, intensity, emotional depth, unconventional thinking, but they often come with great vulnerabilities as well. And Harrison Ford's human character learns to empathize at the end of the movie with the replicant to work together. And neurodiverse, neurotypicals working together and appreciating each other and emphasizing. I started the talk talking about being tossed by the waves, a swim to Virginia Woolf's Lighthouse, and losing sense of yourself. I think carving out small times of calmness and stillness to reflect, to rest, allowing your nervous system to calm down is deeply important, particularly for neurodivergence, but for everyone. Things aren't easy for neurodivergence. The same is true for anyone living with mental health challenges. But the same traits that can make life hard, intense focus, emotional depth, sensitivity, unconventional thinking, but also are the traits that make us great designers and great colleagues and friends. There is a sense with that, which is that we shouldn't try and carry this alone, that we can't just, it's a tendency just to lock this stuff up, to disappear, and to hide from the world. A friend of mine came across this quote, it's a lament, where your wound is as deep as the sea, and I find it incredibly compassionate. Not to minimize, not to rush to fix, just to simply be with somebody and be a friend. Not to say I understand what you're going through, but just to say I'm here and I'll stay here. When someone's struggling at neurodivergent or not, the most powerful thing we can do is not to offer solutions and to try and fix them, but just to sit with them through whatever they're going through. Some takeaways. Knowing yourself is utterly your choice. If any of this resonates with anybody, whether you go down this journey or not, I would say it's not quick, but I do think understanding yourself, and this is true for everybody, understanding yourself is incredibly liberating. It takes time, but that's part of that journey. I think supporting your own neurodivergent community as a group, a family, a company is a really wonderful thing to do. And that might be organising a Neurodiversity celebration week with your own group, encouraging people to speak about themselves, or developing a neurodiversity policy, creating spaces for honest conversations, whatever they are. And then designing architecture that supports neurodivergent minds. We're architects and designers, we work in this industry, being able to make our architecture which can work for the broadest number of people and will add delight to that. Reasonable adjustments. They're not necessarily luxuries, but they allow people to thrive. And then lastly, being a friend, sitting with somebody, where they're allowed to accepting people who are different in whatever, even if they may look very, very normal on the outside, but accepting people's differences and celebrating them is a wonderful thing to do. It isn't about having all the answers, but courageously starting conversations that matter is really important. Thank you very much for listening. Luisa and I are very happy to take questions if anybody has them.
Where do you start? I think that's the aspect. It's one of those things that first thing has crossed my mind over the years. We were having a conversation earlier. I always put it down that I was always catching up or finding out things late,